All right, welcome back, everyone. 2 o'clock, and we're going to get started with our next session. Our last session we just finished up. We're in room 2. Our last session was a panel discussion on tales from real estate investing, and had a great time with our panelists there. If you just listen to that, I'm sure you enjoyed it. I had my family in here just a minute ago, saying hello, stopping by today. So having a good Saturday. Hope you are as well. Hope it's been a productive day for you. Have some great speakers have already spoken, and still have some great ones lined up. Still to come later on today. In room 2, we'll be speaking with Jillian Sidoti, and we're also going to be talking with Matt and Liz Faircloth. So that'll be in room 2. But now here with us right now is Nathan Tabor. I'm going to bring Nathan in here. Nathan, how you doing today?
Good. How are you doing, Brandon?
I'm doing excellent, Staying busy here. Hope you are.
Good. You got a good-looking family there, so I'm glad your kids look like their mother.
Yeah, me too. That way I can marry them off. So yeah, being with all girls, everybody understands why I'm in real estate investing, because I have 4 weddings to pay for, and so I have to start early.
Yeah, I got a 14-year-old daughter, so I just have one, but I'm glad she looks like her mother, and I understand the real estate side of that as well.
Definitely. Well, thanks for being with us today. Thank you for taking up some of your Saturday to speak with our attendees and share some of your knowledge and your experience level. And just to introduce our attendees to you before you start your presentation, Nathan you can reach him at nathantabor.com. That's his website. Nathan has successfully founded and operated more than 24 businesses since 1999, grossing over $150 million in sales. His experience includes commercial real estate acquisitions and redevelopment, flipping 26 multifamily properties since 2006, raising over $1 million from investors, and consulting on deals worth over $200 million. He is author of the Work-Life Balance Program. So again, Nathan, thanks for being with us today. And I am just going to let you have the presentation. Do you have a PowerPoint that you're going to share screen on?
Yeah, I'm going to share it right now. Let me get all that set up here real quick. And
yeah, no problem. Because I know some people have had an issue. Yeah, everything looks good. Their graphics.
Yeah. Can you see my video? Can you see, because it takes over my screen?
Yeah, exactly. No, I can see it great. Everything looks perfect.
Okay, perfect.
I'm going to mute myself and let you have it.
All right. Thank you, Brandon. I appreciate that. I appreciate everyone being with us today. I know it's a Saturday and a Saturday afternoon. I'm actually down in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina today. My daughter has a volleyball tournament, so I'm sitting in a hotel room while they're over bumping that ball, and I'm going to go over there afterwards. So, Brandon, I don't know how we're doing questions, if they're to hold them to the end or pop in with them, but I kind of plan for the end.
Sure.
So if you have questions, just hold them to the end and I'll come back. So,
and just one word on that. Make
Yes.
sure you type them in the Q&A box so that we can track them, because if you put them in the chat box, that feed keeps moving up and I'll miss them. So attendees, go to the Q&A down at the bottom of your screen. You'll see the Q&A. Click on that. Type your question there, and we can answer them towards the end.
And here's going to be, just so all the attendees know on this subject, I have an 8-hour course that I also teach an all day, and it does not cover all the material. So I'm going to hit kind of some of the highlights, some of the things that I see, or some of the either the biggest problems or the biggest issues, or some of the questions I get the most. So I've written a book and the program called How to Find, Finance, Fix, and Flip Apartments from Duplexes to 100 plus units. And what I see out there is when people think apartments, they automatically think, millions of dollars, right? Big 100 plus units, but there's a lot out there in the duplex side, 4, 8, 10, 12 units. The average size unit I do currently is about 40 to 60 units, kind of my sweet spot, as I would call it. So we'll get started here. I think, Dan and Brandon and Stacy, and I don't know who else all has been involved in this, but I've been involved in conventions and summits before, and there's a lot of back end work that goes into this. So I appreciate everybody's hard work. And as we all know, Stacy's probably the one who's done most of the work, just because, that's how we turn it over to people on that. So we covered this. I'll go through real quick. I've done, $52 million worth of real estate, consulted on about $200 million worth of deals. And I've taught these materials to thousands of people at, online conferences and also at, day conferences. So let's look at 4 challenges and 4 solutions that I see in the market. And this is really tailored towards, if you're already in syndication, this is kind of tailored to you. If you're getting started out, this is tailored to you. And what I mean by that is, no matter where we are in our real estate journey, there's always going to be challenges. And one of the top challenges that I hear from people, from those who have 0 units or 100 units or 1,000 units, is getting to that next level. So, do this from your reality. So whether you're trying to get started or you're just trying to get to the next level, this material can be applied to where you are. Because most of the times when we're at a situation and we're trying to get to the next step, in our minds, we overcomplicate things. We make them harder than they actually are. And if we would just take the time and back up. I always like that phrase, how do you eat an elephant? Does anybody know the answer to that question? You eat an elephant one bite at a time. How do you eat a hamburger? You eat a hamburger one bite at a time. But in our minds, when we think about a hamburger, we're like, oh, that's really easy. The solution there is really easy. The solution to big problems are easy, but in our mind, we overcomplicate it. So the way I look at this is basically, raising money is how to date an investor. There's a right way and a wrong way to do that. Just like in dating someone in your life, there's a right way and a wrong way to do it, right? Do you immediately approach someone that you've never met and, hey, will you go out on a date with me? That's okay, right? But do you walk up to someone you've never met and say, hey, will you marry me? I mean, you could, but it's probably not going to turn out well, right? This is an ineffective approach when you just walk up to someone and say, will you invest in real estate with me? It makes the investor immediately clam up, close up, because you've just come at them directly saying, hey, will you give me money? And when you're approaching these investors, mind your P's and Q's, your behavior, your language, your mannerisms. Put your best foot forward. As someone who has invested in my own deals and worked with other folks, don't show up looking like a scrub. Don't show up, looking like you just rolled out of bed. You'd be surprised at the number of people who come to a meeting, come to an investors club for the first time, and they're disheveled. Don't hard sell people from the get-go. On a first date, you don't ask them about being in a wedding. It makes people back off from you. Develop your relationship. Listen more than you talk to what they're looking for, what they're wanting to do, how they're wanting to achieve, or what they've done to be successful. And ultimately in this, don't let your impatience ruin a good deal. You take something to someone, you hand it to them and say, hey, do you want to invest in this? And you text them 10 minutes later, is it a yes or no? That's not a good strategy. So I want to look at this as 4 stages of investor relations. This is a process. This is something that you have to learn, you have to cultivate, you have to implement it in what you're doing. And in these stages, it all depends on going to the next stage of how the current stage goes. And just like in relationships, things can fall apart, right? So stage 1 in this is our attraction. You have to like them and they have to like you. There has to be something there, synergy-wise, that you can bring to them, and same that they bring to you as well. There's the allure of the deal. There's something that they're interested in. Is it something you've heard they've done in the past? Is it something that you can, tell them about, the idea of making money? That brings a lot of people to the table. But what's on the other side of making money? Losing money. And a lot of times, as when we're going asking people to invest, we don't think about the other side of the coin, is that they also are thinking about, yes, I could make money, but how much might I lose? And so that, comes into, what does the future hold? Because real estate can be very secure. It can be a very, wise long-term investment. It could also be a very short-term, quick flip that could be riskier. And that kind of depends on the type of deal. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit. And ultimately, and in some of this, there are investors that even if they want to get involved with you, you might want to walk away from them. If they don't give you a good feeling, if there's already butting of heads before the deal's ever done, I can tell you from personal experience, if you don't get along before you've made money, you're not going to get along during the deal. Step two is kind of spending the time together. So you've met someone, you've talked to an investor, you've not hit it off with them. You've had the cup of coffee. So now you're talking about the deals. You're sharing your numbers with them. This is one of the hardest phases, because this is where it all starts to come together. So you've got someone who's interested. Now you're starting to say, hey, this is what I can do. This is how much money it's going to cost. This is how much money I can make. And this is going to be the split of how we're going to split this profit up. This is a very important, critical tip in this process. Right here, when you're dealing with someone and you're telling them numbers, if you overinflate or exaggerate your numbers to get them interested, and it's a very, not even that you mean to do it. It's kind of like, if there's anybody who's ever been fishing, I caught a 12-inch fish, and it's actually like a, 8-inch or a 6-inch. And in our minds, we exaggerate. We really don't mean to, but we try to make it sound better than it actually was. Well, that's good in the sense of getting someone's attention, but it's bad because once you share the numbers with them, numbers don't lie. So you got to be really careful here once you get, someone interested, that you've been, honest and ethical in your dealings with them. So don't over exaggerate. If there's flaws, if there's issues, if there's cracks in your plan, most of the time someone's going to find it. Because think about it this way. If someone has enough money that they want to invest with you, especially, you get starting into big numbers with a lot of zeros, think about it from their perspective. How did they make that money? How did they get that money? Well, they made it, and they've been able to keep it because they really pay attention to the details. So if you try to push something by them and they catch it, you've lost their trust. They probably will not do that deal with you, or they'll want to bring someone in on their side to manage. You just got to be really careful here to make sure that you present an accurate picture of what you're going to be able to do. At this stage right here, one of two things happen: the disappointment stage or the stability stage. So this is the step three, the stage three in this. The first is the disappointment. You lose the investor. They're not interested. So you've got to start back over at stage one with another investor. Study what went wrong here. Why did the investor not want to get involved? There's a lot of questions you can ask here. And what happens right here with a lot of investors that I see is once they get told no once or twice, they quit. Like, oh, I can't raise this money. I can't do this. Do you know, after major sporting events or, major, successful people, what they do after they lose something? Think about the NFL. When they lose, watches the films because they want to know what they did wrong. They want to know what they can do to improve themselves for the next time that they have a game. But internally, when our pride gets hurt, when our egos get hurt because someone tells us no, we normally don't go back and do that again. And if you want to go to the next stage in real estate, you've got to get over that. You got to get over the no's. You got to get over the being turned down and figure out why they said. Ask the investor if they'll give you feedback, Because a lot of times what happens when someone tells us no, it ruffles our feathers. We hang up, why wouldn't you, why do you do this? You said you wanted to invest with me and now you don't. Click. Don't do that, because you need to still be friends with that person. You need to make them, become a mentor to you or ask them for advice. Just because they don't want to invest in that deal doesn't mean that they might not want to invest in the next deal. Or maybe they never invest with you, but just the information that you could learn from them. So, take your packet, whatever you presented, take it to a mentor, or take it to an investor or a family friend or someone in your family and say, hey, will you look this over? And what's the best thing is, before you present that packet to someone, take it to someone and say, tell me what you see here. Yes, I want to know about the good, but tell me the bad. And then take it like a big boy or big girl, right? Because you want to know what doesn't make sense, what doesn't add up, what are the red flags? Because if someone sees it that's just a friend that's not maybe even into real estate, what's going to happen when someone who really knows what they're doing? They're immediately going to see all the problems. Right here, this could be a problem in the disappointment stage, that it could be a problem with your deal, or it's possible that the deal just wasn't for the investor. Why did the investor back out? It could be it could be a worthy deal, but it doesn't always, maybe the deal is just not for them. Maybe they didn't like it. Maybe they didn't have the funds. Maybe they put their funds into another deal and they just don't want to tell you that they're short on cash right now because they're involved in 3 other deals. Or maybe there's not enough profit. Maybe it's too risky. There's a lot of things here that we don't know, but if we turn our backs on the investor and get upset that they won't invest with us, we'll never know. And if you don't know, then you can't ever become better at what you're doing. So at this stage right here, don't take it personally. If you are going to take this business personally, that every time something goes sideways or something goes wrong, you're going to have a really hard time growing your portfolio and getting investors with you, because I don't know any stats out there. I don't know any percentages, but it's pretty high when you're raising money of the people who tell you no. What you don't need to worry about is the no's. Count the yeses. Because you never know, in this, when an investor is going to come around. But the stage 3, the good thing is here about the stability, is when someone says yes. Kind of like bingo. You've got all the numbers together. Your card's a winner. So you draw up the necessary paperwork. You put a plan of action together and you start on the deal, which leads to stage 4, which is your commitment. You sign the documents. You get the deal going. You got everything. This is your, if this is your first deal or your first major deal or the bigger deal or whatever you're on, this is where the hard work is paid off. This is where all the times of putting your business plan together and your investor packet, things that people don't see, but things that have to be done if you want to be successful, have been done, and this is where it pays off. This is where you start on the deal. So whether you're flipping it or whether you're keeping it in a portfolio long term, this is where you've built that relationship. And this is where that trust that we talked about in stage 2 becomes really critical, because if you've done everything right and you've put everything together and you've been dedicated and diligent in what you're doing, now you can use this investor to, hey, will you introduce me to other investors? Will you introduce me to some of your friends? Will you help me on my next deal? That's what you want to do at this stage. So just remember 2 really critical tips out of this stage. When you're working with investors, make sure you negotiate, because there's really no standard percentage or payback time. Obviously, the time when you do your first deal, you're going to pay more. It's going to be more benefit to the investor. But after you've done 2 or 3 deals or 10 or 15 deals or 20 or 30 deals, you start getting the advantage in that. But I will say this, and if you don't hear really anything else I say in this point, if you do a deal with someone, I don't care how small or how big it is, if it's with your family member or not a family member, you make sure everything is clearly defined out in writing. Because everything will go well in the deal if there's no problems. And as soon as there is a problem, do you know what happens? Everybody starts pulling out, well, look at this, well, look at that. Well, you said on this date, you said on, and then it blows up into an argument. But if you have it in writing and it's clearly defined, you can go back to that document. The challenge too here is finding deals, especially in an economy like this where it's going well. There's a lot of money out there. Finding deals is one of probably the hardest things, whether you're trying to flip it or not, just finding a good, solid deal. My solution to this is building relationships. And let me talk to you about what I mean by that, because everybody has the same access to the courses out there. You know, how do you find properties? Where do you find them? MLS, LoopNet, CoStar, and all of that. But I think the art of finding your deal, this takes a little bit of time. This takes a little bit of, I keep using the word dedication and determination and words like that, because if this were easy, it's just, watching an infomercial, buying a program and becoming an instant millionaire, everyone would be at that point. But if you talk to anybody who's been successful and they've had failures, I've had many failures in this as well, but I've had successes, it takes time and it takes that getting into that. So finding your deal is kind of an art form. It takes your diligence, dedication, determination. It takes time and patience. This is the most important step to me that I find that most people don't do, and they struggle with this, is define your niche. Define out clearly in a sentence or two or a paragraph of what you're looking for. I hear this all the time. I'm a real estate investor. Oh, really? What type of real estate do you do? Oh, I do real estate. That is the vague of vague answers. So when you ask an investor or you ask a broker, what are you looking for? Well, I'm just looking for a good deal. I love ice cream. I am a Breyer's natural vanilla with the little tiny vanilla beans in it, the little black, if you know what I'm talking about, is, to me, the best ice cream out there. But if I walked into Baskin Robbins, I think they have 32 flavors is their thing, and said, can I have some ice cream? What do you think the people behind the counter is going to look like? What are their faces? Like, really? What kind do you want? We have 32 flavors. Do you want it in a waffle bowl? Do you want it in a waffle cone? You want it in a sugar cone? You want it 1 scoop, 2 scoops, 3 scoops? There's 150 different variables, correct? So when you go into someone and you say, I'm a real estate investor. So I know people out there that have been real estate investors for 10 years and have never done a deal. In one moment, they're working on a trailer park. The next moment, they're working on raw land. The next moment, they're working on flipping a $50,000 house. The next moment, they're working on a $10 million apartment deal. They don't ever do anything. And the reason why, in my very humble opinion, is in their own mind, they can't figure out what they're doing. But now, every time I see those type of people coming that I've known, I really don't even pay attention to them. Because I know they're just trying, they got the latest scheme that they think they can make money off of. And so defining out your niche here really is the key to your success. It's the key to being specific with others. It's the key to finding deals. If you can go to someone and say, this is my niche. I'm looking for Class C complexes on the south side of town. I prefer high deferred maintenance, high occupancy issues. I look for troubled assets. And my budget's $1.5 million. So your niche could be, I'm looking for a $500,000 unit on the west side of town. I want it to have major issues. I want it to be deferred maintenance. Whatever define it out. I want vanilla ice cream, 2 scoops, and a waffle cone with Hershey's syrup on top of it. Now, what's the difference there? I said I want ice cream, and I defined what I want. They're ultimately the same thing because they're both ice cream, but one of them's very defined and one's not. Once you define your niche here, this to me is on finding deals, because everybody's like, and I'm going to go through some of the things that you can do, and they're good to do. But if you don't define your niche and you just go out and you start throwing out your name and I'm looking for a great deal, and then you don't find anything, it's because brokers, and I'm a licensed commercial real estate broker in the state of North Carolina, it's because you get so many inquiries, especially in an economy like this, is that you can't take the time to window shop with people who don't know what they're shopping for. You know, the ways you can find deals: real estate brokers, property management companies, LoopNet, CoStar, social media, Facebook, Craigslist, mailers is a good way, unpaid tax bills. These are all things you see on late night TV, right? On infomercials, bank foreclosures, classified ads, surveyors, investment clubs. There's accountants, there's appraisers, attorneys. These are some that you might not have heard of, but these are people who would know of challenged properties because they're the ones who are brought in to either sell an asset or, you know, start looking at how to sell the property. Management companies, financial planners, insurance agents, vendors, electricians, plumbers, general contractors, HVAC. Hey guys, have y'all been working on a house or an apartment complex or a strip mall lately where the owner is having some financial difficulties? But if you go to a and I find a lot of deals through HVAC companies, because HVAC companies are the ones who keep the heat going or the cool going. Hey, Dustin, do you have anybody that's, running behind? And this is the relationship side, because they're not going to just come out and tell you. But, Class C, high deferred maintenance issues, anybody who's like really behind on their bills and just having you patch the stuff instead of fixing it. Well, then if I can get that information, I can go to that owner and say, hey, I know your property's not for sale, but would you be interested in letting me make you an offer? And so that's a relationship. It's not on MLS. It's not on LoopNet. You're not going to find it anywhere out there. The only way you're going to get that is by defining your niche and by developing the relationship with those who have access to these folks, and then just constantly working it, constantly putting your information out there. The off-market deals, the pocket listings. These are agents, real estate brokers. And real estate brokers are still, in my opinion, one of the best ways to find deals, because they are the ones who are around a lot of these people on a regular basis, commercial bankers and appraisers and surveyors and owners and management companies. But if they don't know what you're looking for, you're not going to come to their mind. So, the best way to find these is, call these agents, email them, contact them through their social media pages, contact them once a month or once a quarter and say, hey, Nathan, just, reminder, I'm looking for, and then define your niche. Tell them exactly, as much detail as you can, what you're looking for. This is the opportunity in this area, because when you define your niche so accurately and give them as much detail as possible, and then get to know them, like, hey, can I buy you a cup of coffee? Can I stop by your office sometime and talk to you? And you talk a little bit and listen more. If you want to build a relationship with someone, kind of back to how to date an investor, the good Lord gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And when I meet with a lot of people, and I say this now as I'm doing an hour's worth of talking, right? But you'll go and you'll sit down with someone to talk to them, and they're asking kind of for your opinion, but they never shut up. And I don't mean that in a rude way, but you know what I'm talking. It's like, I thought this person was coming to ask for my help, and they spend the entire time telling me all the things that they've done that hasn't worked for them. Don't waste your time or someone's time like that. Go and say, hey, this is the problem. This is what I'm trying to solve. What do you suggest? And have a pen and a piece of paper or computer, and then write down what they say. Challenge 3, valuing a downed property. Brandon, how are we doing on time? My computer clock gets covered up with the, let's see if, no, it won't show up.
Yeah, you're at 2:29 right now.
2:29, all right. And how much time do I need to leave for questions at the end?
I'll monitor it, and I'll send you a thing through the text box
Okay.
message in the text box to kind of let you know what questions we need to answer.
The problem with Zoom is when you share your screen, it all the Zoom functionality goes away.
That's true. Yeah. I'm sorry. I have mine on multiple monitors, so that's
Yeah,
I understand.
I've got
what you're
multiple
saying.
monitors at my studio at my house, but
Yep.
Marriott,
No
what's
worries.
wrong with Marriott? They didn't hook me up with another computer. So when you get to that point, if I'm still rambling, talking, just hop in and at a point and tell me when you do Q&A.
We'll do.
All right, thanks, Brandon. All right, so valuing a downed property. Here's one of the an interesting thing that I ran into when I first got started into this. You have your cap rate, you have your formula of the way you figure out how a property, what's the value of the property. But the assumptions there when you start using cap rates to figure that out is that the property is stabilized. But what if you're buying a property that is 20% occupied or 80% occupied and 20% paying, and it has, several $100,000 or $1 million, $2 million worth of renovations? And that's where that is my niche. I've bought a 56 unit that was 100% vacant. I've bought a 56 unit complex that 80% occupied, 20% paying. And I had to figure out some way to put the value to the property, because I could run the model of the cap rate and say, if this property was 93% occupied and paying, and there was no deferred maintenance, this is what the property is worth. But what doesn't exist there in that model? It's not 93% occupied, and the deferred maintenance is a lot. So I had to figure out some way, and some people might already know this, but this is one of the top questions I get asked is, how do I figure out what this property is worth? So I came up with a very complex rocket science. Run the numbers backwards. My third deal I did, it finally kind of hit me. I'm a math person. I can't spell very well. I'm dyslexic. So words to me are weird in the sense of that, but numbers make sense to me. So I was really struggling with how to put a value to this property the way it currently sat, because the cap rate didn't work. If I applied the cap rate to it, the property was basically worth nothing because there was no cash flow the way it currently on the financials. So the traditional way wasn't an option. If it is not an option, what do you do to figure out the value? So I'm going to walk you through this process. When you get to this type of property, you basically have to back into the value, because the asking price doesn't matter. So I'll tell you the story about a property. It was a townhomes that I purchased. It had been on and off LoopNet for 5 years. Every time it popped up on LoopNet, it was $2.3 million. It was 56 units. I had driven by it a few times over the years, but it always had been at the wrong time. I had one too many deals going on, but it popped up at 2.3 million. Well, I ran the numbers on the complex, didn't have any of the financials yet, and it came out at about a $2.9 million piece of property. But when I drove through the parking lot, it was sitting on 13 acres, so it was a pretty big area. I could tell all the windows needed to be replaced. I could tell all the roofs needed to be replaced. All the parking lots needed to be redone. So just a visual look at it, if the inside, which I found, matched the outside. So if the outside's bad, traditionally the inside is bad. There was well over $1 million worth of renovations on the property. So I called the broker, met him over there, went through 5 or 6 units, went home, wrote out this extensive renovation budget, because the 5 units I saw, 6 units I saw, they all needed basically full gut renovation. I put a packet together. Besides the purchase contract of 8 pages, it was about 20 pages altogether, and I outlined that the property needed $1.2 million worth of renovations. Now, they're asking $2.3 million. I end up offering them $1,075,000. Now, that's a hard cut, right? I mean, over 50% of what they were asking is what I offered. But in that, I put the purchase contract. I didn't do a letter of intent. I put why laid this out for them. These are the renovations. These are the costs. And then I put a bank commitment letter showing that I could close. Really didn't think much about it, faxed it off. That's when we used to use fax machines before we scan and email everything. It's been about 6 years ago. And kid you not, within 15 minutes, my fax machine rings and something starts coming through. The sellers were down in Florida, signed the contract, didn't counter, accepted the $1,075,000 offer. So closed on the property, spent the $1.2 million, sold it for $2.9 million. Couple of points in there. One, I ran my numbers backwards. Two, when I sent someone, if you're going to cut someone and you're going to cut them deep and you're going to, offer them 50% less than what they're asking, have a good reason why. Because if you just send over a letter of intent or even a purchase contract and they're asking $2 million and you offer $1 million and you don't have a bank letter that you can close, you don't have cash funds available, you don't explain why, this is offensive. And most of the time the people are not even going to respond. And then the next time they see your name and you've offered them 1.6 million, which is what they would take, unless they really need the money really bad, they're probably going to say no to you just because they consider you to be a rude person. So that didn't really mean to get off on that tangent there. So I'll come back. So the asking price in this doesn't matter. When you're looking at the valuation, you do want, obviously it matters in the sense because how they're going to, what they're going to accept. But when there's no accurate financials, there's no maintenance records, you just kind of want to put the asking price to the side. So what you want to do here on your first step is you want to determine the value. So you want to run the traditional model. You want to run the cap rate. You want to figure out what is this property worth if, and there's a lot of ifs in this step here, if the property was 93, 94, 95% occupied and paying, if all the renovations were done, if the property was stabilized, what is it worth? So you come up with that value. When you find that values, this is when you start backing into your valuation. So the second step is, what's the cost to renovate? So you go into the complex, you walk, you put all your numbers together. You figure out what all your holding costs are until the rent is at the point to cover your expenses. So if you're at 0% occupied or 20% occupied and paying, you run your numbers. What's your bank note going to be? What's your insurance going to be? What's your taxes going to be? What's your management and maintenance company is going to cost you? Build your Excel sheet and build out this model that will, for the first 6 months, I'm going to need $30,000 or $50,000 just to cover the operating expenses until I get to a break-even point. And I always tell people in anything I do, renovations wise, covering cost, I had 30%. Just for the, oops, I missed something. I actually normally is about 10% is what I end up with, and I just tripled it. That's my own internal number. So you had to find a number. If you think it's going to be $10,000, I would put $13,000 on it just to cover yourself a little bit. What's the broker's fees to sell the complex? If you start putting everything down that's going to cost you till you get up to even or past even. What's the discount for flipping the property? Because if your property's not stable, if you've got 93% occupancy, but the people have only been there for 3 months, people aren't going to really consider that to be a stable property. Some might, I don't, and I don't know of really many, seasoned investors who wouldn't say, I want to see at least a year, if not 2 years of stabilized rent rolls before they consider it stable. And then what's your desired profit? And then whatever other numbers that you can think of. These are the kind of the top 4 or 5 that I see just right off the bat. There's all kinds, you can start breaking down into this like dumpster fees, or are you in an area where it snows and it's going to be winter and you need to put in there that you got to scrape the parking lot. There's all kind of other little factors that can come into that. So you've got all your numbers. You've got what the property is going to be worth upon stabilization, and then you subtract here, and that becomes your offer price. So let's look at an example of this. Let's say you run your numbers and you come up with $1 million property value. So you've ran your cap rate, everything comes out here, got $1 million worth. You got $300,000 worth of renovations. So the moment you close, you're going to spend $300,000 on getting this property to where it needs to be. You've got $100,000 worth of carrying cost. So the property, however long it's going to take you 12 months, this is your interest only payments on your construction loan. This is paying your manager, your management, maintenance, and this is all your carrying cost in that. And then you want $100,000 profit. When you look at a deal this way, it really simplifies the process, because you can do this on a single family home. You can do this on a strip mall. You can do this on a 10 units. You can do this on 100 units. You can do this on 400 units. It's really just simple numbers. The one number in here that you don't know and you can't control is what's the discount someone's going to ask for on your stabilization. One of the ways I've covered that in the past on mine, because I'm a flipper. Now, in my course, when you have a free ebook you can download, and in that, I tell people you can flip one of two ways. You can flip the property to yourself. So you buy it, get it stabilized, refinance it, depending on the size of the deal, take it to a non-recourse Fannie Mae type product, or to a local bank and refinance it. That's one way of flipping a property, make enough off of it that you can pay your investors out if you want, or you leave your investors in and you pull some money out of the deal so you can go do another deal, or you just flip it, you sell it to someone. So the way I flip my apartments is, as soon as I buy the complex, the day or the next day, I list it for sale, and whatever occupancy my complex is at, I say, once these renovations are done, and I list out my renovation list, the price of this property is this. This is how much it costs at 50% stabilization. This is what it costs at 60, 70, or occupancy, 70% occupied, 80% occupied, 90% occupied. And I give this kind of a menu of sorts of what the complex is going to cost. And I've bought some complex. Now, I always do the renovations. I do not sell a complex until the renovations are done, because I want to make sure the property is at least as its core, its foundation, the structure of the building for the tenants, that it's in good working order, to make sure that's done. But I've sold complexes at 50% occupied. I've sold them at 60, 70, 80, 90% occupied. And I put my number to it. That's my profit that I'm looking for. The more I turn deals, the more money I make, the more deals I can do. Now, take it on the chin with capital gain tax. You got to meet with your accountant and look at all the tax structure behind that. But once you run these numbers, back into this example, the $1 million, the $300,000, the $100,000, the $100,000 profit, you're going to need to buy this property at $500,000. If you pay more than $500,000 for this, what's the only number in this worksheet here that's going to change? Because there's really only one. Well, there's two. There's multiples that can change. If you do your renovations, your budget right, that could go up. It could come down. But the number here that's going to be affected is your profit. If you pay $525,000 for this complex, that comes out of your profit. If you pay $550,000 for it, it comes out of your profit. You pay $400,000 for it, what do? You add $200,000 to your $100,000 more to your profit, and you make $200,000. So once you run these numbers backwards, you want to be very conservative you want to be very liberal on your expenses. So if you think your renovations are going to be $250,000, add that 30% or whatever number we get to, the $300,000. Because if you buy a deal and your numbers are too close, what happens? If you go over on your renovations, you go over on your carrying costs, it all comes out of your profit. And if you run these numbers too close, this is where people lose money, is they run their numbers too close. Not only do they not make any money, but then they actually lose money because they spend more than what the property is worth, and they have to bring money out of their pocket. If you've ever been in a situation, and you don't ever want to be, so you want to avoid this, where you've gone to an investor or a bank and you've gotten money, and you have to go back to them in a month or 6 months or a year and say, I'm over budget. That you don't want to do. So you got to make sure you run these numbers right. All right, challenge number 4 is the unknown. And the solution to that is it all depends. And so I don't know if you've seen any of my stuff I put out or not, but I've been in some unique, weird situations on deals, things that you wouldn't think about, things that are outside of the norm. So one of the first things here is just to ask questions. Even though I've done $52 million worth of real estate in 26 deals, consulted on all these deals, you know what? I don't know everything. I know for a fact I will never know everything. So I know I need to ask questions because there's so many different variables. There's so many things I can't. I'm not a licensed attorney. I'm not a surveyor. I'm not an appraiser. I'm not a plumber. I'm not an HVAC person. I'm not an electrician. I'm not a financial planner. So you got to make sure if you don't know something, ask someone. I learned this early on through my own things, is that someone had asked me a question. I can tell a little story on myself in this sense. Cap rate. The first deal I ever did, I bought 2 homes myself. I bought one, like a little starter home, and bought a second home. I own a couple other businesses, and a gentleman walked into my office and said, "Hey, do you want to buy an 18-unit apartment complex?" Like, I don't know. I mean, somebody said, "Well, I got to sell it in 28 days." I had never done anything in real estate before outside of just 2 personal homes. So I went to a banker. The banker said no. Went to 5 different bankers in 3 days, and they all said no. And I called a friend. They said, "Hey, go over here and see this community banker." Banker ended up doing the deal for me. We got it closed. It was a $600,000 deal, all in. At the time, it was happening in 2006. I had to put 0 money down because that's where banking was. They did all the purchase. They did the upfront, all the renovations. In 8.5 months, I renovated, and they'd have a little bit of background in painting and some building for a business my dad grew up with, but not significant enough. But didn't know what I was doing. Put this deal together, closed it, made $223,000 on my first deal. And I went to a friend's house. She's a state senator in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and she developed Food Lions for about 30 years. And she said, "What was the cap rate?" Now, at this point, I had already been involved in numerous businesses on my own, and one with my brother, and had did a little over 100 million in sales. So I considered myself to be a fairly knowledgeable business person. And she says, "Do you know what the cap rate is?" And I'm thinking to myself, cap rate, is that where in the roof where they cut the line and they put the little cap on it so the air can flow out? And I'm kind of mumbling to myself. And she said, "Please tell me you didn't do a $600,000 deal and not know what the cap rate is." I was like, "Oh, no, the cap rate." "Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I just, and I started, I don't even remember what I said. And she's like, "That's not the cap rate." What I should have done is right when she said, "What's the cap rate?" I should have looked at her and said, "I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know." Because immediately she could tell by the look on my face, it didn't matter what I said at that point. She knew I didn't know what a cap rate was. And if you've ever been in that situation, when you've asked someone something, you've asked them a question, you know immediately before they ever say anything if they know the answer or not. So if you're sitting with an investor and they ask you something and you don't know what it is, what's the better choice? To try to make something up and wing it, or to say, "You know what, that's a really good question. I'm not sure, but if you'll give me a day or two, or hey, I don't know, can you explain to me what it is? Because I'm really trying to learn." That's going to be a better solution for you. So I told you about my first deal that I made $223,000. My second deal, I didn't make a 5-minute phone call because I didn't know I needed to. That one phone call would have saved me $150,000 in 18 months of stress. So I went from my first deal of making $223,000 to my second deal, I lost $150,000. The attorney, the appraiser, the surveyor all told me that a 12-unit complex was grandfathered in. And grandfathered means that it doesn't mean it doesn't meet current code. So if you built it that way today, you couldn't. But that it had, the grandfathering had been canceled because of a prior real estate deal that I knew about, but I didn't think it affected the property. And it was the setbacks. I don't know what it is in your area, but in North Carolina, setbacks between two buildings used to be 25 feet. And the person who owned two buildings split them up and gave them to two nonprofits. And I bought one of them, but the setback was 40 feet. Well, I closed on the deal and went to pull my building permits, and they wouldn't give me my building permits because there was a setback issue. I learned a lot really quick. I learned that I did not know everything, and I should have been asking questions, because had I called the zoning department and said, hey, here's the address for this property, is this zoned properly? So, I said at the beginning, if you, kind of some things that you'll, if you don't listen to anything else, I tell everybody, I don't care if you're buying a piece of raw land out in the middle of the country, or you're buying a building downtown or apartment complex. Every time before I do anything, I go to the zoning department. I get own letterhead, stamped, signed, note, whatever they consider to be a official document stating that this property is zoned for this use that I want to use it for. If I can't get a letter like that, I don't do the deal. Because I ended up having to take this 24 unit complex, I think I said 12 earlier, had to take a 24 unit complex and convert it to a 12 unit. I had to buy 1/10 of an acre of land. This complex sat on an acre. I paid more for the 1/10 of an acre than I did for the entire complex, because the person who owned the 1/10 knew the trouble I was in. Had to put in a new driveway. I had to put in a new parking lot. I mean, it was a disaster. But I had a personal guarantee on the note to the bank. So what do? 1 5-minute phone call to the zoning department. So these are the unknowns. These are the things that you don't know until you should have already known them, and you find out the really hard way. Here's a few other things to think about. Fire hydrants. Who owns fire hydrants? Immediately when I first heard this a few years ago, well, the town, the municipality, the county, the city, somebody other, in government, right? It depends. Fire hydrants can be owned by the town, the municipality, and all that other long list, or it could be owned by the property owner. Do you know how much a fire hydrant cost? Just a little red or yellow? $5,000 to $8,000 for a new one. Plus the permits, plus the piping. So I had bought a complex that had 4 of them. When I bought it, I just assumed they were owned by someone other than the property. Well, I closed, and the insurance company came and said, we need verification that these fire hydrants work. And I was like, okay, we'll call the fire department. It was like, we did. We called the fire department, and they said they don't own the fire hydrants that you do. I was like, thankfully, the fire hydrants worked. They were functioning properly, because it was going to be about $80,000, because there was, it was on that 13 acres, and the piping was going to have to, if it had been an issue, it would have had to all been dug up. It just would have been a nightmare. So these are things you don't think about, right? Why would you think about fire hydrants? If you want to know what a property is like, people always do drive-by. They say, drive by the property. Well, it's good to drive by properties, and I highly recommend that. But do you drive by a property on a Friday night at 12 o'clock at night? Depending on where it's located and your time and what you have going on with your family, a really good way to find out what a property is like is to pull police reports. Most municipalities now, most areas have these online, but if they don't have them online, you can send them a record information. What this does is this tells you what kind of area you're buying in. Think about it. You can drive through an area and it look great at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but what does it look like on a Saturday night? Have you ever heard of drink houses? Hope you never run into one of those. That's where people go and buy liquor and sell it by the glass. It's illegal, but it's not, something that's on the high list of the police. Well, that causes problems in the area. So you can get these police reports and look down, get 2 years worth, and look down through and see what your problems are in that complex or in that area, what are you going to have to deal with? Because a current tenant base or the things around your apartment complex can really affect your ability to stabilize a property. Another is housing complaints. Some of the properties I bought, we've had, cameras that ran down through sewer lines. We've, tried to figure out all these things over the years that cost money to see the due diligence side of what's wrong with the complexes. We've asked tenants to fill out surveys. I've had maintenance guys interview, 3-4 hour interviews with them. I've looked at maintenance reports. And probably I've been in this 12 years, about 6 years ago, I started going to the local community business development, or whichever, what it's called in your area, but it's where a tenant calls to file a complaint against the landlord. I have an issue with my unit. So I started going, getting 2 years worth of housing complaints, sitting down with a magic marker and highlighting things that cause concern. Electric outlets don't work. It's a big expense. I've gone into tenants before and said, is everything okay in your unit? Oh, everything works great. The day we close, they call and say, oh, half of the power's out in our unit. Well, when did that happen? Oh, like 3 years ago. It's like, I met with you a month ago, filled out a thing. Why didn't you mention that then? Oh, the owner said he would evict us if we told you about the power issue. How much does it cost to replace a breaker box? What's the cost to redo the sheetrock? What's the tenant? Where are they going to live while you're doing the work? I mean, there's a lot of questions that come into that. So housing complaints. What do you see in the sewer? Is there raw sewage coming up in the toilet and in the bathtub? Is there leaks? If you see in a 40 unit complex that there's been 10 or 12 ceilings drop in the floor 1 in the bathroom, what does that tell you? That tells you that the toilet in the bathtub and floor number 2 is leaking. Well, if it's been leaking out of 25% in the last 2 years, statistically, you can say the other 75% are really close to causing issues as well. So just some things like that I've never heard others talk about it. I've not, picked up any other programs that said, oh, here's something that you can say, oh, this is great. This is going to work for you. But this is kind of the practical side of things that I didn't think about before I got into it, and really have just kind of come along with it of these are some issues that you need to be aware of. This applies to any type of complex you're going into. This is a good way to find out that information. One other thing here real quick, meter boxes. Who owns not the round part, because that's the part they plug in that counts your power, but who owns the meter packs on the building? So the 26 deals I've done, I've bought 2 complexes that the meter packs were shot. They had to be replaced. One was a 40 unit complex, one was a 121 unit complex. Learned this on the first 40 unit. When I opened up the lid on the meter pack, they're normally in banks of 4. And this is what, runs from the power line into this meter pack. Then you have the round circular meters themselves, and that feeds into the breaker. The first 40 units that I bought, it was $87,000 to replace those 40 meter packs. But when I opened up one of them, it said stamped in there, Duke Power. I'm in North Carolina. It's called Duke Energy now. And I was like, Duke Power, that's interesting. Why would their stamp? I went down looking through all of them. All 40 of them were stamped with Duke. So I called my attorney and I said, hey, will you run a deed search real quick and see why this would be? I'm just curious at this point. All this other stuff's happened. Look into it. I found where mostly in the 60s and 70s and early 80s, when they built apartment complexes, the power companies put the meter packs on, and they own the meter packs. Well, guess what? If they own something, they have to keep it up. So on the 40 unit and the 121 unit, the 40 unit, $87,000, the 121 unit was $220 something thousand. Duke Energy had to come replace their meter packs. That was money that I saved that became my profit. So if you're doing an older complex, even a house, look in the meter pack, See if it's got a little stamp in it. If it's got a stamp in it, then call the power company. Now, when they did replace it, I had to sign a document stating that from this point forward, the meter packs belonged to the property and they were relieved of all liability and expenses. So it's just a cool little side note there. Brandon, how are we doing on time?
Still doing pretty good. We got about 30 minutes left. You got till 3:15. We're at 3 o'clock.
Okay.
Well, actually, yeah, not 30 minutes, just 15 minutes. Sorry.
Okay. Well, that's a good then, because I assume we got some questions.
We do not have any questions right now.
Okay.
Let me put in the chat box. And I can just say right now, just go ahead and post your questions in the Q&A. If you do put them in the chat, I'll be looking at them right now.
Sure. Well, I've got like 3 or 4 more slides, so then I'll pull out there, and if I don't have any questions, then I'll just talk about a few other things there on due diligence.
Okay.
All right. So kind of I wrap up my main slides, and if we have some questions, I'll answer those for you. 99% of my mistakes that I've made in my real estate career could have been avoided. But I learned the hard way through trial and error. I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have someone that didn't buy any of the real estate courses because I was flipping apartments. I wasn't flipping houses. Kind of did it the hard way. But now, my mission, and like I said, earlier, Dan and Brandon and Stacy, and I'll be out at Joe Fairless's conference in Denver, Colorado in February speaking. So if you're out there, look me up and say hello to me. But it's to help others understand this is something you can do. This is something, whether you're getting started or you're there, you've done a deal, you've done 10 deals, you've done 50 deals, but you want to do more. My mission is kind of to help others. So you can learn more about me. You can learn more about my course. You can download a free ebook, the How to Find, Finance, and Flip Apartments at apartments.nathantabor.com. And what I tell people, and I try to tell myself this as well, don't fear failure. Fear being in the exact same place next year as you are today. Because I know what it's like to go out and say, I'm going to do something I've never done. There's a lot of internal, not outside of what everybody else says, right? Some of our biggest distractors are our family, our best friends. Like, you can't do that. You can. Other people are doing it. I'm doing it. Dan's doing it. Brandon's doing it. I saw a panel earlier that I logged in of other people talking about. People are doing it. So there's really no reason you can't do it. Really, the only reason you can't do it is yourself. And once I started realizing that about myself a number of years ago, that my biggest obstacle in my life was me, then I was able to really start addressing getting to where I wanted to go. So if you want to learn more about me, you can go to apartments.nathantabor.com. And if you have any questions, I would be more than happy to answer any questions that you have.
All right, Nathan, thank you. I'm going to put your link in the comments box here. Give me 1 second. All right, I got it here. There we go. And all right, let's see here. We have some questions. All right, just posted the link in the comments box to your website, so you can go there.
Thank you.
And I'm going to start this up. All right, this question is from Bethany. When you are reverse engineering to find purchase price on property that does not work with traditional methods, how do you determine the price for when you are 50% OCC or 70% occupied?
So, on that number there, what the final value is in your final evaluation. Like in the example, if you come up with $1 million evaluation, you're assuming it's 93% occupied. Or whatever some areas are 90%, some are 97%. Find out what that occupancy is for your area. So say it's 93%. Once you know that it's worth $1 million, if it's 93% occupied and if all the deferred maintenance is fixed, then the 50% and the 70% become irrelevant in your numbers. because then where you're covering yourself on that is how much are the renovations, how much is the holding cost, how long is it going to take you to get to even and then start making money. So that's going to cover whether it's 0% occupied or 70% occupied, because that's going to be covered in your holding carrying cost.
Excellent. And another question from Brian is, with everyone predicting a downturn in the economy, would you still buy in the current environment, or would you wait?
So me as a flipper, the best time to buy properties to flip, two kind of answers in here. The hardcore deferred maintenance, high occupancy properties, that is a niche in and of itself. The properties that need just a little bit of paint, a little bit of, maybe a new management company, maybe 10% stabilization in the occupancies, those are a dime. Those are really, those investors right now are a dime a dozen in that market. The people who just want to slap a little bit of paint on it, that's a really hard market to operate in when the economy is as good as it is right now. But if you're into really like rolling your sleeves up and getting to know the high occupancy, high deferred maintenance, there's pretty much a market for that anytime. I'll be honest with you, the best time for that is when the market is down, when the economy is down, because everybody who buys those properties right now that are rolling in the dough, they've got more money than they know what to do with, they're okay with losing a little bit of money because they need a good tax write-off. But as soon as the economy goes down and their stock portfolio goes down and they need that money, then they will sell those properties that they paid $40,000 a door for. They'll sell them for $20,000 a door just to get out of losing the cash.
Exactly. And you started in 2006, so you kind of already have been through a cycle already.
I've been through about 2 cycles now. Got in at 2006. Multifamily doesn't really go along with residential, even though it is for residential people. Right. Multifamily is more impacted by, I'm in North Carolina, so when the economy goes up, we get California, Florida, New Yorkers investing in the South. When the economy goes down, then they start selling. That's our biggest swing there in the South.
Right. So basically your cap rate is going to be affected slightly, but occupancy is really not affected.
No, because, it depends on what kind of complex, Class A, those who have really good credit, that's affected in one way, but you can't really flip a Class A because they've just been built and they're new, and you might be able to flip it, a little bit, make a little bit of money on it, but to make a lot of money, same thing with houses, you want to find that sweet spot in there, which is kind of the Class C or Class B minus, that you can bring it up one notch. So you can take it from a 10 or 11 cap rate down to an 8% cap rate by, curing the deferred maintenance and stabilizing the property. And that's where you make your money, is when you can take something that's just a little bit older, got some issues, and correct those issues. And then you've got, as they say, meat on the bone to sell that.
Exactly. Value add, as opposed to a performing core property like a Class A.
Correct.
Yeah. And when you have an economic downturn, your Class A's are always going to be the most likely affected because they're people usually, it's the upper end of your rental market. Those people that are about to buy houses and things like that.
Most people who live in a Class C or B minus complex are not affected by the economy the way someone who's making $100,000 or more a year. Because people who are living normally at a Class C, B minus, they're making $8, $10, $12, $15 an hour. They're blue collar worker, or their service industry and restaurants. And those really aren't affected as much by the economy as someone who's a banker, or a lawyer, someone in a higher end trade industry.
Okay, excellent. And one question we have is: Do you focus mostly on D and C classes, or just what do you focus on the most?
Yeah, my focus mostly is B minus to D plus. You get into that D and D minus, at least in my experience, you can cure the problems of a complex. You can, renovate, you can do the deferred maintenance, you can bring the occupancy up. What I have found a lot when you get into that D and D minus, you also have the community or the area to deal with. Mm-hmm. And if you're not careful, you can renovate a complex, but if you don't control what's around that complex, mm-hmm. it won't be but a month or 2 or 3 until your complex is right back to the way the rest of the community is.
Exactly. That's very important. Here's another question. Do you think that what you just said about the Southeast growing during a hot economy and selling during a slow economy still applies in this hot North Carolina market because of natural growth? Unlike previous cycles, demand went up for Carolinas.
No, I think the demand is up. And I think the reason, you take a 40-unit complex, go to LoopNet and look at what the cost of a 40-unit complex is in California or Philadelphia or Florida, and then look at what a 40-unit complex is in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. And when you run the numbers, you get a better valued property, a better cash-on-cash return in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, or Charleston, South Carolina, than you do in Philadelphia.
Right. Exactly. All right. And that is all the questions that we had for right now. Nathan, thank you so much for being with us today and taking time away from your daughter's volleyball tournament. I know you're probably excited a little bit to get a break from that, but at the same time to get back and see how she's doing.
Well, she's got a game at 4, so I got a few minutes. And, any parents out there, when you go see 14-year-olds play volleyball who are doing it for the fun of it, you go because you love them, not because the game's going to be great. So, yes, I'm probably going to get the worst dad of the year award on that one. But you do it because you love them, right?
Exactly.
And exactly. Let me close with it. I mean, I saw you with 4 beautiful little girls there, and I do work-life balance stuff as well, but it's based on a relationship with God, and I'm not going to get into a spiritual side, but I meet a lot of people, and I used to be this person who thought that if I could make money, I could find the happiness or I could find the contentment in life that I wanted. Brandon, you know what I found? The more money I made, the less contentment and the more misery I had. Because the more money I made, the less time I spent with my family. Because the more you make, the more you spend. The more you spend, the more you have to make. And it becomes this vicious cycle. So if your focus of getting in real estate, in my opinion, is only to make money, you're going to be sorely disappointed. Get into real estate to better yourself. But if you can't put your phone down on a Friday evening and spend time with your kids or your spouse, when you have money, guess what you're not going to do? Put your phone down and spend time with your spouse or your kids.
That's very, very good advice, because we talked about that in the last panel. Your focus can't be getting; it has to be giving. And you mentioned the Christian perspective is, we have a whole different mindset. It's not we're not doing this is not the end goal, right? This is a means to an end. This is part of life, but there's more to life than just making money or going to work. It's about raising a family. And so I definitely appreciate those comments. We have to definitely keep that in mind. And when we make any decision, how it's going to affect others, especially our loved ones. So thank you for that additional closing comment. And enjoy the tournament. Enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you again for taking time out of your day to share some valuable content to all our attendees about your space and what you've done. Really amazing.
All right. Thanks, Brandon. I appreciate it. Y'all have a good rest of the day.
All right. Thanks. You as well.
All right. Thanks.
All right, everyone. As we wrap up this session, we'll be starting again in 15 minutes with our next speaker. It's going to be a pretty interesting SEC attorney, crowdfunding lawyers perspective and some information there. Let me pull up. And this is Jillian Sadati, crowdfunding lawyers. She's going to be on and share her expertise. If you're like me, you don't know as much as you need to know about SEC regulations. So be sure to join us. And while you're in the break, be sure to go and check out the forum mfim.forum.com. And you can ask questions, talk with people there. You can go into the mfinsurvey.com, be entered to win a $500 Roost Chris gift card. And also, don't forget about the next conference. We're working on some great things. We're going to make it even better for you next time. More content, great speakers we've had this time. We're going to have great speakers for you next time. So make sure you go to nextmfin.com and register there for some great discounts right now. But we'll see you back here in about 15 minutes.